can't say anything about enlightenment because enlightenment doesn't actually exist. Because there's no soul, individual soul there to be enlightened. And the whole notion is just an abstraction of nonsense. And in the first place, it wasn't really made by the ancient cultures. It was more so a idea imposed upon them by onlookers who did not understand the state of being that they were in, and so they called it the right way to live, or in another way, looking into the past and seeing how your ancestors lived and saying they were enlightened. The actuality of enlightenment is that it is not real, because there's nobody here to enlighten or be enlightened. And what I can say is something about equanimity. Because equanimity is basically blank. I mean, it's not even blank, because there's, you would have to blank yourself to be blank, but you're not even blank. Like, your thoughts and feelings and all, they're there, but there's nothing to know, and there's nothing to see, there's no aspiration, there's no need to save the world, because it can be light or darkness. It doesn't matter what it is, but if you identify with something, then you plunge yourself into essentially the duality of all things, which is that if you can identify anything, then it must have an opposite. But equanimity is not something you can identify. I mean, you could point to somebody who's calm and say they're what would the word be? Equanimous. They have equanimity. These are not applicable statements, but what I've come to sort of, because all words are more or less, they're meant to be fingers pointing at things. They're not things. Words are not real in the sense that, stuff is real. Words are pressure waves, and words actually begin as electromagnetic signals in your brain, in combination of neurons firing and neurons creating what you call thoughts, which are electromagnetic fluctuations inside the brain as well. And this is my point, is that there's like nothing here. There's nothing here. You go into neurology, you go into physics, you go into anything else, you will never find the center, nor will you find the self. You will never find the soul. It's not there. It's not there. Humans don't have it. The sky doesn't have it. Rabbits don't have it, because everything is it. That's the only thing it could be, because everything is, in fact, it's... If you study physics, you can go at this, one angle. You study physics, first thing you're going to realize, studying classical physics and particle evolution, is that everything is in fact like tree branches stemming off of one central module unit thing, or whatever the fuck. Nobody has any conception of what it is, because they have no way to mathematically, truly conceive anything like that. It's pure. They call it pure energy. They say that before the Big Bang, it was just a bed of energy. That bed of energy is the Big Bang. And before the Big Bang, before the bed of energy, it must have been just another universe. So then if you want to go into originism and talk about, well, we got to figure out where it all comes from, you're flat out of luck. There's nowhere to go. It'll just keep going on forever. Anytime you find any state, it's like, well, it seems like everything comes from this. In fact, you have to then acknowledge, well, then what happened before that? Well, it looks like, the only thing that could have happened was either it was just a bed of energy, or there were other things happening, and then it collapses into just a pure bed of energy again. Nobody knows. There's no God defined there. There's no ultimate superstructure. There's no ultimate geometry. Pure energy doesn't have geometry. It doesn't even have quarks. Nobody can even conceive of what would have been. It's just, they just call it energy. It's just a field of not even stuff, because atoms and quarks are stuff. And quarks are technically quarks, up quarks, down quarks. Strange quarks are the composites to, electrons and protons and mesons. But all of the quarks are virtual particles. You can't actually see them. You can't observe them. You can only observe their effect. That's the only way that they've been able to prove their existence in any way. And if they could go further, they don't have the equipment. They just don't have the measuring tools at all to go any deeper than that. And that would have something to do with a fundamental misstep in the way that we've conceived of measuring, because we have to do it with a tool. We have to do it with, a piece of metal or something that we can record, something that, you can go back and can't be manipulated by the brain. The reality is you need a brain that's not capable of manipulating information. And the only way to do that is a brain that's totally clear and reset. That's not somebody who's not there, because you don't have an identity. You sort of act as though. But if nobody ever showed up to give you your name, nobody ever showed up to give you a name, never would have happened. Never would have cared. You would have probably had an existential crisis about it in some way if you learned how to talk. But the point is that all of this is malleable. From the most basic to the most complex, it's all malleable because it's all subjective. So there's nothing anybody can say. There's nothing anybody can say about, how the world is supposed to be. None of that is ever going to work, because it's just it's just a big amalgamation of bullshit. Thoughts that are electromagnetic fluctuations, which only occurred more or less after the fact of all the other stuff that happens first. And even this idea of, the linearity, because in a circle you can say you came from the other side, but actually, when you were on the other side, you came from where you are now. And where's the beginning? Does it matter that there's something that you perceive as like an ending or a beginning? That's just a label you gave it. You could say the same thing about right now. I don't know how any physicist or anybody else would ever argue that this would be the ending or the beginning. I don't know what convincing argument they could give. It's easier to say that it all exploded out of the seed, because we see that, all the trees came out of seeds, and we were small, and everything else used to be small at some point. So we say that, well, this universe must have come from something small. It must have grown. It must have been born. And these are literally all tricks of perception. We give these things weight only because we didn't have this perception until we were quote unquote born. But before that doesn't have any effect on whether or not there is reality, because the revelation is that there is no self, there is no soul. So without a brain, without a body, nothing has changed aside from the fact that the brain and body are not operating anymore, and they're going back into the earth. But it's still the same field, the same atoms, the same molecules. You cannot find a defining difference between life and inanimate objects aside from the level of energy and the complex processes taking place within them. Case in point, one cubic centimeter of this body, 1 cubic centimeter of this body literally outputs 3,000 times the energy of the sun. And I've seen other people calculated it up to 6,000 times, and they were calculating that, and I think it was, I don't know, it was a different unit of energy. But the one that I saw, I believe, was milliwatts and microwatts. I don't remember the exact values. And it's a good opportunity to just let that bake in. You can Google it if you want. I'm not making this shit up. You just go Google it, see, you know, people have been at this. They wanted to debunk that because it was either Vsauce or Veritasium who said it on YouTube, and then a bunch of people were asking on like Quora, and yeah, it turns out no, that's totally correct. 1 cubic centimeter of a human body is outputting 3,000 times the energy of 1 cubic centimeter of the sun. That means you're 3,000 times more powerful than the sun per square inch. Like, it's literally just the level of complexity. That's all this is. And this is not new. None of this is new. People just can't accept it. That's just how it is. They made a movie about this. It's called Frequencies, and it's not what I'm saying. More so, it's a very comic movie about people going to this school, and they all get their frequencies, and your frequency determines your luck, and knowledge determines destiny, and so on and so forth. One of the kids tries to break the rules of free will, and a whole bunch of really weird shit happens to him. It's so funny. And the kid's name is Isaac Newton, and he's got a -7 frequency because he discovered gravity, the most obvious thing. Anyway, the whole premise is that free will is not real. Free will was never real. Determinism is also not real. In order for it to be determinism, somebody would have to be there to be determining it, or it would have to be up to one thing for it to be determined. But it's not. It's just I don't know. 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 One hit's enough. There's nowhere to go with this. We all came into this world being told a bunch of nonsense about the way life is, and there is nothing to say about the way life is because, first of all, there was never any life to begin with, and second of all, these are just thoughts. Nothing. Actuality is actuality. Thoughts are a subset of that actuality, and that's all I can really gather. That's all anyone can really gather. You go to any philosopher, any physicist, any neurologist, it doesn't matter. You're going to find people who have they've settled on something. It doesn't mean that they know. It just means that they've settled on something, and that's their, now they're a professor, or now they're doing, now they're doing like fucking documentaries and this, that, and the third, or they're part of the ongoing research, and they will more or less come outright and say, that we have what we have, and that's really all it comes down to. There is no ultimate statement about anything. There's no ultimate statement about anything at all. Nobody actually knows how, like, what way is the body supposed to be. Well, that depends on who you're talking to, and also how they want to be. And one person, if they're homosexual, they might be a totally different state of physical health and wellness if they were heterosexual. And you could have those possibilities, and nobody is to say how it's supposed to turn out. You're not even supposed to just let it happen, because that's another thing that you're doing. There's no reason. There are plenty of reasons, but there's no reason for life to begin with. There's no reason for any of this to begin with. So why go into this state where we're constantly logically forcing ourselves into doing these things that we think are going to solve it because it's up to us? It's fucking not. It's fucking not at all. Anybody out there? Well, no. This is just another set of thoughts about, colloquial terms and things that I could use, like little bits and pieces of information about my life and what I've learned. I haven't fucking learned anything. Nobody has fucking learned anything. We've just become people. people just become something, and you have to go through the process of sequentially becoming that. The knowledge was all already there. All of the math is already, like, the math is just a representation of the actual stuff. All the possibilities are already possible. The wheels are already turning. There's no, what is there to say about this? And yes, I can hear it. What about the children in Africa and the murders and the women being raped and, you know, the children being stolen and, you know, the countries falling apart. And the reality is that, I mean, this is all totally hinging on the idea that things need to be good. And who, in fact, why would I ask who said that? I know I heard many people say that. Nobody, I don't care. It just doesn't matter. That good is not there, again, no ultimate reality. Not even nothing. You can't find nothing anywhere. If nothing is, then nothing is everything. Because literally the vacuum itself is just fluctuations of energy. If there were ever any space, the space was the energy. The space is the time, is gravity, is energy. And that is what you find when you go and you don't, because I didn't study physics. I didn't go get a master's degree. I just fucking let the people who got the master's degrees, you know, I just kept unearthing everything that they post online, and then whatever it is, just throw it at me until eventually it fucking clicks. And you see what they see. You're not seeing some ultimate, you know, realization that's going to solve your life. No, you're just seeing what they're seeing. The ultimate realization that solves your life is that your life can't be solved because it doesn't need to be any specific way. And there's no, it's just here, just now, just right now, right here. This is, and it is the past. Everything that is right now is the past. The past never went anywhere. It just turned into the present. And there is no future. The future's not there. The future, the only future that you live in is the future of the thoughts. The thoughts that you think signify what's going to happen. But there's no actuality to that at all, because if there is a future that is tangible, it is, you know, it is the many worlds of quantum mechanics. It is all the possibilities that ever could be. And so there's no determining where you're going to go. This is all just ridiculous. It is ridiculous. You know, there's something about your heart. Your heart is a brain. It's got something. I don't know. I don't know enough. Maybe I just don't know. I don't even believe in knowing anymore. There's no logic to this. Because anything you would want to know, your brain doesn't just have a storage house of memories. It's got reminders everywhere. And the fact is that you don't get to take your memories with you after you die. So why are we all, what is the point of constantly grasping and grappling on to the memories of life? There is no reason to do that. Unless you're doing something and you're in the middle of doing it and you're going to continue it in the morning. So it's there in your mind. Otherwise, if it's done, then it's done. Our childhood is done. Our old relationships are done. There never needed to be a reason. There never needed to be a need. There never was a need. Life is just lifing. It's like waves on the ocean. Just a perfect quote from Alan Watts about how the field of energy is all that is, and the field of energy on the surface of the earth is peopling in the same way that the ocean is waving. people just happen. Like waves just happen. There would be no sense in remembering every wave. There would be no sense in naming every wave. Maybe every once in a while you want to think about this wave that you saw one time that was 25 feet and all the other ones were 12. Who cares? But maybe that was cool and you want to think about it and you want to laugh. But like, it is obvious. And in the same way it is obvious, it totally fucking isn't. Because reality is not what we call reality. Nor is actuality. Because your brain will draw something up when I say that. My brain will always draw something up when I say reality, but that's not, it's a word. And that's a thought. And there was never any ego to begin with. There's a sensation of having an existence, which is very carefully and very complexly made up by the brain. And it's a feeling. And what a lot of feelings are in fact thoughts that have been exacerbated into emotions. They're not reactions to what's happening outside. They're reactions to what's happening inside. So you feel like you're a person. You feel like you have to get up in the morning. Because you felt something when you thought about it. Now you feel like you have to do it. But that's not what thoughts are. Thoughts are not feelings. Feelings happen anyway. Thoughts are not feelings. Thoughts are just thoughts. Thoughts are not things. They're just thoughts. Things are things. Things are totally indescript. It's a totally meaningless. Just because if it's an atom, then is it a hydrogen or proton or a meson or what? Things are just things. See, all of this was always nonsense. The words are just words. I mean, when you really see it, they start to not make sense, and yet they still make sense, and it's just talking. It doesn't have any significance. There's nothing in the words. You're not waiting for some realization or some, crescendo or peak of the experience. That all of that was just fake and an illusion. And in many cases, it's just, thoughts that you exacerbate into emotions because your brain understands that it can exacerbate the experience of something to make it bigger than it is. It turns ant hills into fucking mountains. But it can only do that after visualizing the mountain, coming back into the vision of the anthill, thinking about how it feels about the mountain, and you do the same thing with girls that you don't love. You get into things that you think are gonna make you happy, and they don't. So you think about, you don't want to change it. So you think about what would make you happy, and you visualize that, and then you come back into the moment and superimpose. So it makes you feel better. This is the ridiculousness of what we use our thoughts for. There's no point to doing that. People waste. Why am I even talking about people? This is just ridiculous. There's no point. All I'm doing right now is just unlearning. I'm unlearning everything. I don't know why I turned on the camera. You don't need to do anything to live, because there was never any living to begin with. Particles evolved out of the field of energy we called the Big Bang, And then, more so masses of rocks that became suns and planets, and then from that evolves, you know, dirt and minerals and gases and fucking, I don't know. Then you get fungi. Fungi were the first, the first in the line. So one of the first, I think. Actually, no, they were the first. When fungus grew to the size of trees and they ate the methane atmosphere, or was it methane? It was some gas that we would be, dead if if that were our atmosphere. And then from that, you get all the other stuff. It's just evolution. And evolution seems to go into its own state of entropy. Or, yeah, least entropy. Just as everything else. We seem to be sort of like this cascading explosion where gravity is pulling, everything down. Gravity, or rather not gravity, but the forces of nature do annihilate everything that has ever lived. Every complex thing that has ever existed on this planet gets annihilated. But the bursting of evolution and the constant climbing of, stuff just seems to overtake that. And eventually it just won't overtake that. And the universe will go into a state of entropy. Or, I don't know, I call it the universe. That's a fucking... I guess I don't think of anything when I say the universe, so it's a term that works for me, but in many people's minds it's a real place. And to me it's just whatever is. Whatever is, that is what is, and that is the universe. And that is the tangible stuff that I am, that we are, that is the body. And all that ever was, all that ever has been, all that's ever been felt, all that's ever been said, all that's ever been experienced is the body. If it's the body of the atom or it's the body of the human, it doesn't matter. Names don't matter. If there was ever any memory, there is memory everywhere, because memory is just the process of more or less making inferences out of what you have now. It's not an accurate system.